All right, so today we are going to talk about just cosine. Let me put a little reminder up here as far as the order pairs go. So that's 1, 0, 0, 1, negative 1, 0, and 0, negative 1. So this time, since we're talking about cosine, we are looking at the x value. So if I look at all the x values, looks like the largest value for cosine is 1, and the smallest would be negative 1. So 1 and negative 1. Even though cosine is the x value, they still would go here because the values go on the y-axis and the radians go on the x-axis. I'm just looking at the x values, though, to determine what would go here. So I'm going to do 0. I'm sorry, this is 0. This is pi over 2. This is pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. So if you recall back from lesson, I think it was 8.3, this is what we labeled in radians, and that's where all these come from. So at 0, cosine is 1. So at 0, I'm going to go up to 1. At 1/2 pi, cosine is 0, so I'm going to put a point at 0. At pi, cosine is negative 1, so I'm going to come down to negative 1. At 3/2 pi, cosine is 0, and at 2 pi, cosine is 1. And if I connect, looks like it's going to keep continuing. So I'm going to go ahead and label over here. These are all the negative values of the ones I just wrote down on the other side. So this would, now I'm going to go this way. So at negative pi over 2, cosine is 0. And then I got negative 1. And then I got 0. And then I got positive 1. And it keeps on continuing. So I can go around and around this unit circle, and it's just going to make this little curve all throughout and around and around and around. Okay, so the only difference between sine and cosine is the way the graph looks. So on 8.4, sine started at 0, and then it went up. For cosine, it starts at 1, and then it goes down. So I'm going to write that down right here. Here's my origin. Cosine starts up at 1, and then it goes down. The equation looks like it's the same, except instead of sine, it's cosine. And to make my equation, I still need to find A and B. A is the amplitude. And this is how you find B. So A is the amplitude, and again, that's how you find B. Okay, let's see here. Let me look at this really quick. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and skip to the second page. I'll go back to the other page here in a second. So I want to write an equation for cosine. So again, to do that, I need all of my equations to look like this. And remember, to find B, it's 2 pi divided by the period, just like it was for sine. So I'm going to take 2 pi divided by 6 pi, which it turns out to be 1/3. So B is 1/3. There's the amplitude. So all I have to do is substitute the A and the B, and then you got your equation. So y equals 4 times the cosine of 1/3 theta, or you could write it as theta over 3, but I'll just write it like this. All right, let's do one more of those. Let's see, I'm going to cross off 6 and 8. Let's do number 7. So here's the amplitude. This time the amplitude has a pi in it. That's why I chose to do this one. The period is 1. So if I take 2 pi divided by the period, I just get 2 pi. So all I have to do is substitute the a and the b and make my equation for cosine. So y equals my amplitude, which is a, is 2 pi, and then cosine of b, and then I put a theta there. So this is a and this is b, you just substitute those in. All right, let's go ahead and continue on. Let's go to the next page this time. I still want to write an equation, but this time I have to find the information. I have to find a and I have to find b. So I'll just do 9 instead of 10. They're pretty much the same, and we did this before, so for sine, so I think we should be okay if we're just doing 1. So first I need to locate the origin, which is right here. All right, let's check out the amplitude first. So if you notice, I am counting by 2's, which means the highest my y value gets is 5, and the lowest my y value gets is -5. Therefore, my amplitude is 5. Now I got to find the period. So if I start on the y-axis, it's going to start over right there. So here to here is 1 cycle, and then it starts over. So the period is from 0 to 2 pi, which means the period is just 2 pi. So in order to write an equation, I have to know what a is, which I already do, and then I have to know what b is. So I got to find b. I already know what a is. I got to find b. This is the period, by the way. I wrote that down wrong. The period is 2 pi, not the b. I got to find b. To find b, I take 2 pi and divide it by the period, which is also 2 pi, which means b is equal to 1. So I now know what a is, and I now know what b is. So all I have to do is substitute those two values in for a and b. Now you gotta be careful on this one because cosine starts up at 1. This time it starts down. Maybe not at 1, but it starts down. I don't care that it starts at -5, I only care that it starts down. So that means I have to put a negative in front of my 5. And I don't have to put the 1 there because by putting a 1 there really means that I don't really need it because 1 theta is the same thing as theta. If my graph started up first, then I wouldn't need to put that negative. So that's my answer to number 9. All right, so let me go back actually to, I think it was the first page. Yes. Okay, now this is something new. We didn't do this with sine yesterday. Okay, so I am going to cross off 3, but I am going to do 2 and I'm going to do 4. And that should be good for this one. So this one's pretty much in detail. I have to find, first of all, the period and the amplitude. So let's go and do that first since we kind of already did that. So here's the origin. And it looks like, let me use something different. Okay. Here is how high my graph goes, and here is how low my graph goes. So it looks like the highest it gets is 1, and the lowest it gets is -1. Therefore, my amplitude is 1. Now I gotta find the period. So the period is where I'm finding one cycle. So it starts down here, and then it goes up and down, and that's where it starts over. So it looks like the period would be 2 pi. But I don't really care what the period is so much. I want to know what b is. That's where I'd always take 2 pi and divide it by the period, which is going to be 1. Oh, I notice now I don't really need to write the equation. That's okay. I'll write one anyway. So my equation is going to be y equals negative cosine of theta. That's my equation. And the reason it's negative is because cosine should always start up first, and it's starting down. Now, I didn't have to write an equation now that I see that, but if I did, this was my equation. Really, there's a 1 there and there's a 1 there, but I don't really need to put those since they're 1s. Okay, so I did that. Now I have to identify the maximum values, the minimum values, and the zeros on this interval. So that means I am looking between 0 and 2 pi. I am only looking in between these two sections. Okay, so I want to find the max and the min and the zeros. So I want to write down the x values where there's a maximum y value. So right here is a maximum. That occurs at pi. In between this interval, these two right here would be a minimum. So those occur at 0 pi and 2 pi. Now this right here, this is the origin. So really this would be a 0 and this would be a 0. So that would occur at 1/2 pi, because it's in between 0 and pi. And the other one's going to be in between pi and 2 pi, which is 3/2 pi. So those are all my answers to number 2. Okay, we got to do one more of those since we haven't done this before. We didn't do this for sine. Let's go and turn the page. Okay, so I'm not going to write an equation this time. So I want to find A, the amplitude. I want to find the period. I want to find the maximum. I want to find the minimum. And I want to find the zeros. Okay, so here's the origin right here. Looks like I'm counting by 2's. My maximum y value is 5. My minimum y value is -5, so my amplitude is 5. Now I got to find the period. So on the y-axis, I'm starting here, and I'm going to start over right there. So the period is 2 pi. Now I have to find the maximum, the minimum, and the zeros, but I only want between the intervals of 0 and 2 pi. Okay, so my maximum occurs right here, which would be at pi. My minimums would occur here and here, which is at 0 pi and 2 pi. And the zeros occur here and here. In between 0 and pi is 1/2 pi. And in between pi and 2 pi is 3/2 pi. Now, this is just a coincidence, but these were the exact same answers that we got for number 2, I believe. That's just a coincidence. Okay, so hopefully we're fine so far. So that brings us now to the last page. Now, really, that's not the last page. We have a unit circle in the back, but I'm not really worried about that at this time. So in this one, we're going to need a calculator for. So you need your graphing calculator. And a few things I need to do, or you need to do. You need to go to your mode. You have to make sure you are in radian mode for this to work. And you also have to change your window. Your x minimum is going to be 0. Your x maximum is going to be 2 pi. You literally have to put 2 pi there. And then your scale is going to be pi divided by 2. Okay, the y's can stay the way they are. Okay, so I'm just going to do 12. I think if I just do one, we should get the rest. So I'm going to put two things in my calculator. And for y1, I'm going to put 3 cosine of theta. And for y2, I'm going to put 2. So this is y1 and this is y2. Okay, so 3 cosine, and then you can use x really if you want. You can use any variable. This says t, I'm going to use x. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to change it to an x. And then y2 I said was just 2. Now since I already fixed my window, I'm going to hit graph. So I need to figure out where they intersect. Looks like they intersect in 2 places. Therefore, I'm going to have 2 answers. So to find that, we've done this before. I go to second trace, down to intersect, and I'm going to arrow over to where they about intersect, and then I hit enter 3 times. So 0.841 would be one of my answers. Now I got to find the other one. So second trace again, intersect, arrow over to the other one, about right there, hit enter 3 times, and we get 5.442. So those are my 2 answers. So that's really all you have to do in this last section is put them in your calculator, make sure you're in the correct mode, radian mode, fix your window, and then find the intersection. So that was all over cosine. Tomorrow we're going to do tangent.